Are you building a house that you want to last for a generation or two, or maybe many generations? Well, your two best options are clay tile or slate. Let's talk about the differences today. So I'm coming to you from Texas. Texas is notorious for killing roofs. We have a hailstorm that comes through every couple years and absolutely destroys the standard shingle roof on houses. But what we're talking about today is a roof that's a lot more expensive and ultimately a lot more durable. We're talking specifically about clay tile and slate roofs. Now, I just put a slate roof on a house right down the street from here. Absolutely gorgeous house. And on this house we're building, we're actually going to be using clay tile. Now I've got with me Doug, one of the suppliers with me. Doug, thanks for joining me.
You're welcome.
I wanted to ask you, Doug, a couple of questions before we actually get into the details, because I think the number one thing people are going to want to know is how long are these roofs going to last, and roughly what do they cost? So let's start with how long will they last?
Generally 50 to 100 years, and for a superior product, well beyond 100 years.
So good product, 100 plus years. When we see those pictures of roofs from Europe, some of those roofs have to be a couple hundred years old. Is there much difference between these products and what's on those houses that are that old?
Well, many of those roofs are that age, but those may not be the original tiles in some cases. And along the Mediterranean coast is a pretty forgiving environment.
Yeah.
If you get into the mountains in Europe, just like here in the United States, you're going to have a denser clay or a top grade slate to hold up to those conditions.
That makes sense. Now tell me about cost. You know, these are not your low cost. These are really the top of the market when it comes to cost. Where are we starting at on both of these products?
In the two-piece clay tile systems and a slate roof, usually about $10 a square foot.
Okay.
And up, depending on.
So roughly $1,000 a square for the builders watching this, and it really goes up from there too. That's really your starting level, and it could be quite a bit more than that. Now let's talk about grades and qualities. So for instance, we've got two different clay tiles here. These are both clay. But if you look at these, we can tell some differences. Number one, this one is a lot heavier than this one. And if you look at the thickness too, this one's certainly a lot thicker. Tell me about these two, Doug. What's the difference between these guys?
Well, this is a mid-grade tile, basically a mid-grade absorption percentage, still acceptable in the Texas market, but it's not what's going to be considered a superior tile that will last beyond 100 years, probably a 75 to 80-year lifespan. The other one here actually is a denser clay, and that's basically the difference. That higher density is going to translate to longer performance in the weather.
Now you mentioned absorption ratio too. I could imagine if you were in an area that's going to have some freezing weather, that a tile that's going to absorb more water is probably going to be more prone to an early death compared to a denser tile that absorbs less. Is that right?
Absolutely. As that moisture that does get into the clay freezes, it will expand and it will destroy a lower grade tile. So in the northern climate, you have to go with a higher grade product.
That makes sense. Now tell me about walkability. You really shouldn't be walking on these roofs if you're not a roofer, right?
That's correct. They are not made for foot traffic. They're made for getting the water off your building.
But I could imagine, that being said, that this thinner tile would probably be more prone to issues and cracks and breakage than this thick tile. Is that a fair assessment?
It would be, especially considering that this is the grade 1 tile that is a stronger tile to begin with.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, let's transition to slate. Tell me about this slate in particular, and then give me a kind of an intro to where the different slates come from and what the difference is in quality and lifespan.
Well, this is one of our Spanish slates that you just installed down the street here. This is a grade 1 slate, which is the top grade for slate in terms of density, strength, low porosity. This comes with a 100-year material warranty.
Wow, 100-year warranty on the material. That's awesome. Yes. And if you think about slate, I mean, this is a quarried product. You know, this is not man-made. And in Texas, one of the big things that kills roofs is the UV damage and the heat. If you're thinking about rocks aren't damaged much by the sun, and heat doesn't do much to them. So I can imagine this roof's going to do really well in the Texas heat.
They hold up very well.
Now let's talk about install details, because my assumption is the install is going to make a difference. We've got 3 different types of nails. Tell me about the nails that we're looking at here and why you might choose one versus the other.
Well, the galvanized nail, which is the longer one you have in your hand there, we wouldn't want to use that on these products.
Yeah.
that will not even last the 50 years that we want to make it the threshold for a tiled roof system.
Gotcha.
This is part of how you justify the cost, is
Yep.
the lifespan of these systems.
Yeah.
So we've got to look at a fastener that's going to make it through the life of the tile, and that's going to be a copper fastener or stainless steel.
So this is copper and this is stainless. Both of those are going to last that full 100+ years.
Yes.
Why would you choose copper versus stainless though?
It's mainly contractor preference.
Okay.
They're generally interchangeable, although there are some conditions like on the coast where you wouldn't want to use the copper.
Yeah, makes sense because the copper is going to maybe experience more corrosion outdoor in that saltwater
Yes.
weather compared to the stainless.
Absolutely.
I'd also think that maybe if you're using copper and you thought you might have more breakage, if you have a lower slope roof, let's say, you might want copper because it'll be more malleable. It might be easier to get that nail off.
The copper is easier to repair when you do need to remove the nails.
Ultimately, what's the lowest pitch you would want on the architecture of your house for either one of these products?
Well, in slate, that's going to be a 412 pitch.
Mm-hmm.
In clay tile, it does vary a little bit by manufacturer, but the lowest slopes that they're considered acceptable is 3/12.
Okay. And the higher pitches, my guess, are going to last longer because people are going to walk on them less, probably. Is that right?
That's correct. Once we get to a steeper slope of 812 and up, we tend to not see as much foot traffic problem because it's too difficult to walk on that roof to begin with.
That makes sense. One last thing, Doug, you showed me a really cool test that you can do yourself that talks about grading. Will you show me how to do that? Here's that copper right there.
Basically what we can do is take this copper wire, and if we scratch this on a clay tile and we're not scratching the copper away, then we know we've got a soft tile.
So meaning, if you look here, there's actually copper flecks in there, and if I wet my finger down, it'll actually send that copper away. Sorry about that, y'all. And so this is that top grade tile, and it did absolutely no damage scratching that. You can see how dense that is. Now, how's that do on the mid-grade tile?
It should still hold up fairly well, and we are looking at a finish that's applied over the surface there.
Yeah.
But that is fired on.
Yeah, so it didn't scratch it or get any meat out of that tile. And if these were a lower grade tile, you'd actually see it digging into the tile,
You would
right?
be digging into the clay, and you would know that's a low grade tile.
Yeah, remember though, you got to do that with true solid copper. That's why I use the ground wire here on this 1412 wire, because your copper penny is not actually copper anymore, and it's not a fair test.
Not solid copper, no.
Doug, we'll put a link to your website below if you have questions from Doug, but thanks so much for answering these basics.
You're welcome.
And guys, I want to encourage you to use those more durable roofs. When we're building houses that are going to last for some generations and we're really doing things right, I think the roof is a big part of that, especially down here in Texas where that roof is a big sombrero over the house, shedding the sun's rays and that UV damage. Choosing a durable roof like this is really going to set you up so that you can pass that house on to the generations to come. Guys, thanks for joining me. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram. Otherwise, we'll see you next time.